From the WATE.com Digital Center, answering your legal questions. This is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
Thanks so much for being with us. And back with us is our executive producer, Jeff McClain. We've got a lot to talk about today.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, it's top of mind for everyone. Obviously, we're talking about the arrest of young students for threats of mass violence in schools. It is happening nationwide, as we know, and here at home. But let me set the stage here for what we're talking about today. One sheriff in Florida says he is sick of it. Let's listen.
I can't say this clearer. You don't stand up on an airplane and yell hijack. You don't walk into a movie theater and yell fire. And you don't get online and post that you're going to shoot up a school. And now, for you parents out there, today's hoax cost around $21,000. There's 2 people in custody. We're coming after you. And starting Monday, your little cherub, we're going to start publishing his face and doing perp walks with him when we take him into custody. And then we're going to show pictures of you, the parents. Because you don't want to raise your kid, Sheriff Chitwood's going to raise them.
All right, that was Sheriff Chitwood, and what you're looking at there is what he actually did. He followed through on what he said, posting on social media mugshots of kids 11 years old showing their perp walk. We're not showing that kid's face because it's our policy here at WATE when it comes to most juvenile cases. But it is out there, and here's where we bring in Greg Isaacs and Jeff McClain. Your thoughts on watching all this. I was trying to read your face. What do you think about that? We don't see things like that.
Well, you know, to me, it kind of looked like parking lot press conference justice. So, you know, obviously everybody is on edge and there's a lot of issues. Law enforcement, prosecutors, parents can't get their finger on why threats of mass violence at schools has become epidemic nationally, epidemic in Tennessee, epidemic here in Knox County and contiguous counties. But, you know, you begin and end with the law and individuals that are under the age of 18. And the mantra, as we've said before, this gold standard is what is in the best interest of the child.
So clearly laws are different in Florida. Does this vary state by state?
Well, let's talk about, you know, juvenile privacy in the state of Tennessee. Juvenile courtrooms are open to the public. However, they can be petitioned to be closed. The juvenile court judge has to do a balancing test. There has to be a finding of specific prejudice that would outweigh the public's, and this is the words of the statute, compelling interest to be present.
And media can't
Oh,
cover
yeah.
these.
There's
Never.
no media coverage. However, there's an exception. If you're 14 or older and you were convicted of a delinquent act that under the adult law would constitute first-degree homicide, second-degree homicide, aggravated rape of a child, aggravated robbery or kidnapping, then the media can petition to be part of the proceedings. What's interesting in this case in Florida is these perp walks and these press conferences are happening outside the courtroom, outside the courthouse. So if it happened here, it would be interesting to see how broad these protections, the privacy guarantees of juveniles would extend. Do they extend beyond the front door to the juvenile courtroom?
Well,
So is
to
the sheriff
the
skirting
detention
the law
facility?
by doing this outside?
the thing about this is something that I think people need to, recognize here is when we, as the media, come to a place and oh, you can't film me, you can't film me. That's what we hear sometimes, and understandably so. But there is a concept called the expectation of privacy, and if you are outside in the view of the public, you do not broadly have the expectation of privacy. So if I can see you and I'm not on your property and I'm not somewhere I'm not supposed
You're
to
on
be.
a public sidewalk. How many times have I
Yes.
said that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that then you can be shown, and that's not just the media. Keep in mind that's anybody. So Google Street View, that's something that's come up, or who knows what. But I actually looked this up in the Florida statutes, and according to Title 57, Chapter 985, Section 4, the protections on juvenile privacy that Greg just mentioned in Tennessee, in Florida, they are limited to the ability for a law enforcement officer to share those records covers any juvenile who is accused of an adult felony. So anything that would be a felony in adult court, they can use that. They can treat that individual, that child, as if they were a adult for the purposes of open records. And if any time they are transferred over to adult court, it doesn't have to be a conviction, and it's not just a list of transferable offenses. It's any felony, with some provisos about this and that for objections, and then there is discretion also. So you have either they're just outside and you can tell, hey, we got the kid and he's just outside, or it falls under these allowances within federal law.
I would like
or
for
within
many
Florida
of you
law.
to weigh in and see. I want to hear what from parents what you think about this, and from other community members, because we're talking about an 11-year-old. Your brain is not fully formed yet. We don't know what kind of. There are just so many different things that go into all of this.
In these cases, and I want to talk generally and not specific because I'm involved in a number, but they run a spectrum. And there are cases where someone says there's a bomb in school, or that sheriff was alluding to, an internet threat, and they have to vacate an entire school. It costs tens and thousands of dollars to do the search, to do this, etc. And that's on one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, where you have children looking at each other and saying, if you don't be quiet, I'm going to bring my gun to school. Don't come here tomorrow and shoot you. And, I guess, obviously, in the first instance, where you vacate a school with a false report, false threat of mass violence, your intention was to create that chaos. Now, when you have a one-on-one dialogue with two students, was the intent or the mens rea that I am warning you I'm going to commit an act of mass violence, or was it two kids being kids and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, etc.?
If you look at that array of weaponry, that's pretty serious
but
stuff.
that's a different scenario.
But he showed his friends that.
But we're talking about a specific case versus the privacy rights of the individual.
Yeah.
So here's what I am concerned, being a criminal defense lawyer, being a parent, is that you diminish certain rights, certain protections. You diminish the concept of parents' patriae. That's where the court is supposed to be the friend of the juvenile, is supposed to rely heavily on mental health experts and counseling and rehabilitation as a visceral reaction to this violence we're seeing. Is there an easy answer? No, but let's not throw out, all the protections of when the sheriff, a good comment or a good issue was, and we've heard that here, parents were coming for you. Well, you better talk to the prosecutors and figure out how you're going to come for them. Because there's only been two cases, I think, nationally, the one Crumley case in Michigan and the one in Georgia. And they were extreme cases where they have prosecuted parents for homicide, voluntary manslaughter, for providing guns, not being proactive in protecting the public when you know your child is crying out and is going to commit an act of violence. I don't know what parent can stop an 11-year-old from going to school and saying something crazy.
Well, the sheriff is saying, I want to embarrass the kid, and I want to embarrass the parents, and he's saying this is a deterrent.
And what I think, though, that they're going to have to be careful about is, keep in mind, these kids are not convicted, right? And if they're talking about shaming a parent, if they're opening up to public ridicule or mockery, and these are private individuals, the defamation standards, they're awfully, broad. Like you could potentially be accused. Now there's a compelling public interest, perhaps.
But Jeff, that's a great point. And as Lori said and you pointed out, you know, we see people all the time getting in and out of police cars, getting arrested, showing up at the detention center. It's a game we lawyers play. We try to tell the media we're going to go left and we go right. We sneak people in under the Sally
How
port.
dare you?
Yeah. But you know, you guys are there. You're lurking around every corner. But you know, that's fair game, because when you commit an act, you're arrested, you're transported, and you got to walk from the police cruiser into the jail. So you know, that's the public has a right to know. But if you're the sheriff and you go, hey, I'm playing the shame game, the blame game, whatever, and think about this. These kids have not been convicted, and you know, here's the two ends of this debate that I don't think we or anyone can answer. If you stop one school shooting, this tactic has been worth it. If you publicly shame one kid and he commits suicide, hurts himself, hurts someone, then it's been an abysmal failure. Because one thing that I'm seeing in these cases, the juvenile courts are trying very hard. They're having risk assessments done in Knox County, in contiguous counties, on whether the juvenile is a danger. And one of the tests, you have psychologists, they give a battery of forensic tests. One of them is, does the individual, the juvenile, have homicidal or suicidal ideation? And they try to ferret that out. Now, if you were someone that had those mental health issues and you're being shamed and blamed before you ever got your day in court, that could be a problem. So, you know, it's good to talk tough. We've got to be creative on how we stop school violence. But you know what I don't hear in this debate? And don't misinterpret my words, because I'm pro Second Amendment, but I don't hear anything about the gun. And all I'm hearing about is putting 11-year-olds' faces on and talking tough to kids. So, you know, to fix the problem, we need a comprehensive solution. But back to, could that happen here in Knoxville, Tennessee? It remains to be seen, because that perp walk happened outside the walls and confines of juvenile court. So it would be interesting if that did happen, where the law enforcement's desire for specific and general deterrence would collide against the juvenile court mandate for privacy. It would be a clash of the titans if that were to occur. But you know, we've got to find a solution, and we got to find it quick, because locking more kids up is not solving the problem. In fact, what I'm seeing is it's having the opposite effect, because you're seeing more threats and more arrests. In juvenile court, I was there last a few days ago, and we talked about this last week, Lori, but within 48 hours, the Knox County Juvenile Court handled 18 cases involving threats of mass violence. 18 separate people. So, you know.
And what about the futures? I want to talk about that, because sometimes these, if there's a conviction, it can be expunged at some point, yes?
Yeah, it can.
Or the kid can be found not guilty. Just to make a point on this,
Right.
guns, those are airsoft guns we just showed you.
With that
not illegal
11-year-old
to
in
have.
Florida.
I'm not sure about the legality on those other weapons, but you know, there's no gun possession charge. Who knows if this goes to court and is found not guilty?
Or no, Jeff, that's a great point. So I see this 11-year-old being perp walked. I see the sheriff shaming and blaming on TV. I see this arsenal of guns, and oops, we forgot to tell you they were toy guns.
They mentioned it, but not very clearly.
Well,
was
it went over
buried
my
in
head.
the
Yeah,
message.
it's so that's interesting. But and again, in Tennessee, juvenile records are confidential. Even though the public can go to the courtroom, you can't pick up a copy of the petition unless it's one of those over 14 transferable first-degree, second-degree homicide convictions. But here, laws are very juvenile friendly. If it is dismissed, it's automatically expunged. That means it's as if it never happened, no public record. At the period of, if it's a misdemeanor after a year, automatically subject to expunction. It's in fact mandated by Tennessee law. So there's more to this than meets the eye. But what we're not seeing, that the public don't see and the media doesn't see, and you don't see in the parking lot press conference is the mental health experts are in court every day desperately trying to look at each individual juvenile.
And salvage these kids
Okay,
and their futures.
So here's the thing. You can talk tough in a parking lot. These are felonies that carry 1 to 2 years at 30% if they were adults, but they're not. So what do you do to this juvenile if he's convicted to make sure a year, 2 years later,
Then what?
that he's fixed, because he ain't going away. I mean, he's only 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So, you know, these are questions that I think, and it's interesting when you juxtapose, and Jeff gets an A for legal research today. Gets
Yes, he
the
does.
Paralegal Award.
He's our lead researcher.
But you know, each state is different. In Florida, a much more open, you know, issue with we have 7 or 8 transferable offenses. You have to be over 14. Florida apparently is, if it's an adult felony, you're fair game if you're the media, the public.
And I just, you know, want to point something else out that I think that I don't know that maybe they've considered, maybe they haven't, but Greg just mentioned if these are expunged, or if it's dismissed and it's automatically expunged, or found not guilty, so will the sheriff then remove that record from their website, that perp walk video? Because, you know, this is something that's in the 21st century. These things live forever.
It will still exist somewhere.
And there is there's a whole industry of people, of attorneys who specialize in getting your record cleared, getting your background cleared, and going back and saying, well, okay, this happened, but my client was found not guilty, or served his time, the records are sealed or expunged.
Well,
Shouldn't you take that down?
Let me tell you what you
Sheriff?
can't do. For example, here's a good juxtaposition. And everybody, you know, does not want to be on the 24-hour arrest list, because, you know, it's amazing. People watch it religiously, and it's kind of like reading the obituaries. The Knox County Sheriff has the 24-hour arrest. Your picture's up there, what you're charged with. If you're a juvenile, never, ever is your picture on an arrest list. But here's the thing. Let's say you get a lawyer. Let's say the lawyer works some magic, gets it dismissed. You was falsely accused. Google doesn't automatically take you down.
Right.
And it's a matter of the search engines. And does it go away? No, it fades after more content is put on top of and layered on top of your arrest. But when you hit search, Jeff McClain mugshot, bop, 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 it pops back up.
I didn't do
He's
it.
shaking his head.
Hypothetically.
But yeah, that's a good point.
Yes, employment records, background checks, and these are kids. So
How far and how long could this follow a kid is the point. And I go back to what Dr. John Reiswick said in his news conference right after we had that rash of school threats. And he said, let me be clear, we want every kid to graduate. So he's saying, in and of, let's salvage these kids, but we're just not talking about how or what's going to happen.
And let's talk about something that we forget about. 2 parallel trains. Not only do you have the juvenile court proceeding, but our legislature has made a threat of mass violence a zero tolerance offense. So the kid is out of school for a calendar year. So there are extreme consequences, academically, criminally, to the parents. So, if John Q. Public thinks that these cases and these threats aren't being taken seriously, I will tell you, when you go to juvenile court, it is the exact opposite. They are being treated extraordinarily seriously. And think about this. I was talking amongst my office. You're a magistrate, you're a judge, you're a prosecutor, and within 48 hours you've got 18 people that have said, I'm going to commit an act of mass violence. You know what? You fail one time, and you let that one person go home, and that's the person that was serious.
It comes back.
Absolutely.
It's a tragedy that's unspeakable. So, that's why tensions are high and the stakes are high. That's why you're seeing parking lot press conferences. But, the simple answer is, Jeff and Lori, there is no answer.
Yeah. And I think that you can see that in the frustration that you're seeing from these law enforcement agencies and these school leaders. They are urging, begging parents, get this message across to your kids.
Begging
Do
parents to parent.
absolutely anything you can do to
Right.
stress the importance, the huge gravity of the situation here. Do not let this happen to your kid. Get ahead of it. Get out in front of it.
Talk to them about what they're looking at on their phones. Look at their messages. There's a way you can do that.
I noticed that John Ricewick, superintendent of Knox County Schools, he was emphasizing what it does to the other kids. So if it's not you, if you as a kid think you're not too worried about your future, how about the stress that it puts your friends under?
Yeah.
How about what it causes them to worry about whether they're going to feel safe at schools? And that's something that's,
Kids
they-
begging to stay home.
yeah, they want this, even if it is nothing happens, it has an impact.
Well, think about this. So, or you're the student that overheard the comment about I'm going to bring a gun to school, and then we have a hearing, and then they know who you are, and so suddenly you found yourself snitching on the guy that is being viewed as incredibly violent. And, those students are in a very untenable position. Those parents are in an untenable position.
It's
So,
just a terrible ripple effect all the way around, and somehow, some way, it's got to stop. And we just don't, like you said, we don't know, other than shining a light on how different people are reacting to it. And like you said, encouraging parents, please talk to your kids. I mean, you could feel the frustration from this sheriff saying, look, if you're not going to raise your kids, I'm going to raise your kids, and this is how I'm going to do it. You want to talk more at 5:30
Let's
about
do it.
this? Let's do it. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.